Good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for joining. Let's begin with our speaker, Dr. Amit Ji's introduction. Dr. Amit Ji, we are honored to have you. Dr. Amit is the Director Evidence for Change Catalyst Management Services and a co-founder and non-executive director of Calidus Social Enterprises, which is a Bangalore-based CSR project lifecycle management firm, working with underserved NGOs in capacity building, technology enablement, and developing a SAS model marketplace for CSR project execution so as to help them access corporate CSR funding on a scalable and sustainable basis to create impact. So, yeah, thank you, and we can begin.
Thank you, Anshika, and thank you, Amit ji, and all the participants for coming on the Saturday.
Thank you. Okay, I think first of all, a very good morning to everybody present here today, and thank you for sparing an hour on Saturday morning and joining this. So let me just paraphrase this. The next 1 hour, it's of course I would delve into the specific topic of carbon credits and offset. So largely, I have divided it. The first part is the why, and then the what and the how. What is the background and the context of carbon credits and offsets? Why do you need it? And then, of course, what is carbon credits, and how do you make offsets and trading and things like that, right? And that's something which I'll attempt. More than a downloading of information and knowledge, I think it's a reflection of the data and information that I'm presenting, and I would like each one of you to respond and make it interactive as and when I'm asking, because it's something which is very reflective. I mean, it's not probably a panacea for all ills in the world in the climate change and the global warming perspective that we look at. So let me start off with that caveat or whatever you call it, and then we'll go on. So let me give a background and a context to why are we talking about this topic at all. I'm sure these are some statistics which probably some of you know, most of you would know, but it wakes us up. For example, 60% of all species live in soil, right? Making land the planet's most biodiverse habitat. Only 0.5% water on Earth is usable, right? I repeat, 0.5%, and this is the next COP29 is based on our land, our future, right? And therefore, I'm quoting this data. 1.4 billion people livelihoods are directly reliant on access to fresh water, and this is including jobs related to food, beverage, energy, water industry. 24 billion tons of topsoil are washed or blown away worldwide every year. Now, this is just a backdrop. And mind you, the bottom line on this slide is very, very important. When we say all these are precious sources of carbon capture and storage. And then as we go ahead, we'll see how do you capture and trade and offsets and things, right? So this is the context and the background. Just a quick journey of the net zero. We keep saying net zero, and I don't know, can anybody tell me what exactly is net zero? How do you define net zero? I hope participants have their mic, Punita ji.
Hello, sir. Good morning.
Yes, good morning.
According to my understanding, net zero is जितना आप emission करते हो environment में, उतना ही आप offset करते हो by doing offsetting.
Perfect. So emissions is equal to removal, right? That's what you're saying. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so just to get it, this. Now, the world started with sustainability back in 1987, when the Brundtland Commission report came up and said, look, we should have enough, for today without compromising the ability of future generations, to have the resources for tomorrow. And that's what led to the establishment of what we keep hearing of IPCC in 1988. Right, the Intergovernmental Planet on Climate Change, right? These are all background institutional mechanisms to assess science related to climate change. Then came the Earth Summit, the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, the UNFCCC, which is the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Then came 97, which is Kyoto Protocol. The developed countries, minus the US, committed to reduce their emission emission target reduction targets by 5.2% from 1991 levels. Okay, then came 2009 Copenhagen Accord, and of course 2015. I'm bringing up everybody. I'm sure the younger people in this room, if they are, know more about 2015 Paris Agreement, which brought about the concept of INDCs, intended nationally determined contributions. So every country, including India, right, the 180, 190 signatories to the Paris Agreement have set some goals in terms of I will reduce my carbon emissions by this much. I will make my carbon intensity of my operations this much. I will get so much energy, 30% from renewable energy from 2030, and so on and so on. And then there's the Conference of Parties 26, 27, 28, right, which keeps looking at different commitments for net zero, right, largely targeting 2050. But as many of you would know, India is targeting net zero for 2070, a carbon neutral, right, in the Indian context. COP28 and ahead, there's something called global stocktake, fast tracking emission reduction was introduced, scaling finance, increasing the flow of capital to developing countries, and indigenous people and focus on MSMEs. So that's the background and the context that we have made a journey in roughly the last 35, 36 years since sustainability came into the jargon of everybody. I mean, today you hear far more of sustainability, but there's nothing new. I mean, it's been around from 1987, but the world is waking up obviously slowly. Now, where are these emissions really coming from, right? I don't know if this figure really surprises anyone, but energy contributes to almost 73% of the greenhouse gas emissions, right? And greenhouse gas emissions, a large part of is carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and so on and so forth, right? And this figure really gives you, after energy, you have about agriculture, forestry, and land use. I mean, in short, called AFOLU, contributing to 18.4%, industry 5.2%, waste, and then it is divided, if you see the figure, between specific energy use in industry, between iron and steel, chemicals, petrochemicals, other industries, road transport, aviation. So if you are from that particular industry, I'm sure you would appreciate or realize how much energy used in transport, energy used in buildings. So energy is broken down into energy used in buildings, 17.5%, transport, 16%, industry, 24%, roughly, the major uses, right? Is anybody surprised with any figure here? A quick check. Is anybody surprised agriculture contributes 18%? I'm just trying to trigger a thought among you. Yes, I think somebody was saying.
No, sir, it is a right figure.
No, the figure may be right because obviously it's not my figure. I have taken it from data, which is in the public domain. But I'm saying, does it surprise you? Right?
Yeah, I'm surprised that forestry is figuring in this.
Okay. Yeah, but that is because of deforestation, right?
Oh, like that.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I mean, when I say industry sector, right?
Okay, fine.
Yeah, it's not right. So if you because lands and land use change is happening, right?
Yeah, right.
As and when you develop, you have more and more deforestation. So if you have, let's say, steel plant being set up in Odisha or Chhattisgarh, you are obviously deforesting a lot, right? And therefore, we'll see what is being done today in the world, and but that's coming from there. But forestry is also equally this of removing carbon from that. It's probably surprising you because of it, right? But this is an emission sector-wise. What is happening? And a lot of you would know about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions of industry. Just to put it up there, right? Scope 1 is direct emissions by the company. Scope 2 is indirect because of the kind of energy you buy. If you're buying renewable energy, then it's less. If you're not fossil fuel energy, then it's more. Scope 3 is indirect emissions in your value chain partners. Why is this important? Because a lot of you from corporates may know that sustainability reporting is now including the value chain partners, at least for the top 250 companies by market capitalization, as per the BRSR, the Business Responsibility and Sustainability. Now, these have become extremely important, the context and the scope, and therefore we are getting into things like emissions, etc. Yeah, so you did talk about forestry, for example, and these are global regulations which are really putting the pressure. Carbon border adjustment mechanism in EU deforestation regulation, and that comes to the point. They will not allow you to export from India or any other countries any forest produce or products if it's from degraded land forest after 31st December 2020. That is a regulation. And therefore, you might suffer in your exports, you won't survive, and so on and so forth, or they will this. And there has to be traceability and verify the origin of products. Products like soy or beef or palm oil or wood or timber, bamboo, etc., to ensure this compliance. Now, this is a backdrop. Basically, I'm just looking. Now, where are we as per our global goals, right? That's an extremely important, stock taking that we do before we get, dive into carbon offsets and carbon trading. Why are we doing all this, right? The why is extremely important. Now, we have committed, to limit it to 2 degrees or at least to one, I mean, at best to 1.5 degrees, right? We are already 1.1 to 1.2 degrees rise post-industrial revolution. Okay. Then there's net zero commitments by 2050. 130 plus countries have pledged, but very few have binding commitments. The commitments are not binding legally, right? They are just commitments. And therefore, there is an issue. Methane emissions reduction, and that's where agriculture comes in, or livestock comes in, right? There's a huge amount of, for example, a large part of our land is under paddy. Let's say Punjab, Haryana, Eastern UP, Western UP, and West Bengal, and things like that. There's huge methane emissions. What are we doing about it, right? 100 plus countries have pledged, early stages of pledge. Financial commitments are there to the extent of $100 billion annually from developed countries to developing countries, but increased flows, but still far below target. Now, the last COP28, in Dubai, also got in something called loss and damage fund, which many of you would have heard, right? What is the losses and damages that have occurred due to climate change and global warming? And is there a fund for that to look at? And then, of course, deforestation, right? End deforestation and restore degraded lands, which is wastelands, right? Slowed in some regions, but still high globally, with 1.7 million hectares lost in Amazon forest in South America last year alone. So this is goals versus achievements, right? And we are far, 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 as we see. And therefore, we are miles away from achieving a lot of our sustainable development goals. Out of the 17 sustainable goals, you would find that a lot of these, almost, a lot of these are linked to climate change and global warming. Definitely things like decent work in economic growth or sustainable cities and communities, which is SDG 11, life on land, SDG 15, life below water. Climate action, of course, is a direct threat, right? Responsible consumption and production is a source of this, right? Of global warming. If we're not responsible, it will not. And very, very importantly, I think SDG 17, partnership for the goals, is going to be critical between businesses, civil society, and governments. See, government, one of the things I want you to reflect upon is, see, the government signs up the INDC, the intended nationally determined contributions. But the contributors are not only the government, a large part of it comes from private sector, civil society, and individuals like you and me, right? How far are we addressing our own lifestyle? And therefore, you would have heard that India has something called LIFE, right? Lifestyle for environment, right? And which has been, promoted a lot right from the Prime Minister's office. Are we changing our lifestyles? Are we using public transport? Are we being responsible in our production and in consumption largely as individuals? Are we changing to electric vehicles? Are we looking at renewable energy? And so on and so forth, right? And that's the crux of it. Is industry really going to act without mandated sustainability reporting, transparency, accounting, disclosures, which are coming in and being mandated or not, or is it just greenwashing and impact washing, right? Now, these are questions that need to be reflected upon, and I think that's very, very important to keep reflecting upon, because I think there's no straight cut linear answer to this, right? Now, let's come to the what of it, right? And I've set the context in terms of why. Why do we really require? Because we're really far, far behind our goals, right? Uh, we have a lot to make up. Industry and development and emissions go somewhat together, right? It's a little difficult to balance out that. But then it's not development or growth; it's development and growth, which is inevitable, which is a must for all of us, right? So carbon removal and carbon credit. What are we really talking about, right? We're talking about carbon emission reduction and removal, right? It's simply the process of taking CO2 out of the atmosphere or ocean and storing it permanently, sustainably, maybe in the soil, maybe in terms of regenerative agriculture. How much are you cutting emissions at the source? It could be scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 for industry, it could be agriculture and forestry. And it will include techniques like, afforestation, reforestation, soil carbon sequestration, air capture, ocean fertilization, and so on, right? On the other hand, on the right side, you see carbon credits and offsetting, right? So businesses and individuals can offset the emissions by financially supporting projects that reduce emissions. It can allow companies to invest in emission reduction projects, and companies can buy carbon credits to comply with emission reduction. And we'll come to how is that done, right? So, and there's carbon capture, usage, and storage, which is in short CCUS. And these are technologies that mitigate carbon dioxide emissions from large sources, right? Like power plants, refineries, and removing existing CO2 from the atmosphere. Now, there are three broad ways of looking at carbon removal and carbon. One is nature-based solution, right? But probably the world has forgotten nature-based solutions, and therefore, since the industrial revolution or past the industrial age, we have this problem today of global warming and climate change. The nature-based solutions are simply things like afforestation and reforestation. How do you switch? How do you tweak your agriculture to natural farming, organic farming, regen agriculture, maintaining soil health and topsoil? Because if you remember the first slide, we talked about, what is the data and statistics on how much they contribute to carbon capture and storage, right? Many of you staying closer or who know about, mangroves, right? Mangroves are great ways, and there's a lot of mangrove plantation happening in the Sundarbans in West Bengal, in Odisha coastal areas, right? By, let's say, steel plants, etc., who are emitting a lot of carbon dioxide. But mangroves not only capture carbon and store them, but also mitigate the impact of global warming due to flood, cyclone, tsunamis coming on the coastal areas, right? So it's a double impact that you're looking at. Then you have hybrid solutions like biochar, rock weathering, carbonated materials, right? So biochar, when you burn biomass without oxygen, then you create biochar. A lot of industries like steel, etc., are even looking at biochar for their blast furnaces, okay, of replacing iron ore and coke, because it's a far, far, far better way of addressing the carbon emission. And then, of course, there are engineered solutions which are very, very sophisticated in terms of direct air capture, storage, bioenergy. But this is the gist of a high-level overview of what kind of solutions are possible. And then, of course, we come to what, why, and how. Why and what, and then how. Now, this is a question to be pondered upon before we really look at what's happening in the world, right? And our carbon credits, and that's the $1 million question, right? And before I actually get into this discussion, right, I would just like to take a view from the audience here. Any thoughts from anybody? Do you think it's a solution? Any thoughts? It doesn't matter. I mean, there's no right or wrong here. It's a matter of reflection, right? We have 38 participants here, and I'm sure people have their own views and perspectives. And I think these sessions are more to develop our perspectives and really have critical thinking to find out, right? Anybody would like to have a view, at least 2, 3 people before I go ahead?
I can add,
Yes, please.
I feel, of course, this is not
Sure,
the
Parita.
solution because it is not reducing anything. We are just postponing the
Right.
problem. But as short term, because of so much global
Okay.
pressure and regulations, companies are looking for
Right.
short term solutions. So maybe short
Right.
term horizon, even if companies have, with a good long term horizon of really removal,
Right.
it can work. But if they are
Yeah.
just depending on this, then that's a wrong approach.
Absolutely. I think well put, well articulated, because this is not a panacea for all ills, right? Let's be very clear of it. But I think, yes, but can regulation, I mean, when you're saying postponing the solution, you're kicking the can down the road. But can regulations make you get into long-term solutions, right? I think only if we reflect that this is not a solution, would we start thinking of that. That's what I'm trying to really, impress upon them. So having said that, and if that is the this, right, let's look at, yeah, so carbon removal, carbon credits, we have looked at that, nature-based solutions, okay, carbon credit offsets, optimal solutions. Yeah, okay. Now the background is, of course, different countries, why carbon offsetting, right? Why are we talking about this? Why are we really looking at what's happening, right? This is the historical share between post 1850, okay? Now, if you really see the blue colors is all developed countries, and the yellow or orange is all developing countries, right? The contribution of developing countries is far less, obviously, because they were not so fossil fuel. But since 1850, the developed countries have emitted far, far, far more because they have grown at a faster trajectory, and any development is energy intensive. And therefore, this concept, because you have a problem between developed and developing countries, you have this concept by UNFCCC about common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Of course, there is a battle between developed and developing countries, and therefore that $100 billion per year for developing countries, it's not coming, but it's at least there in the COP agendas, right? And developing nations therefore need to prioritize infrastructure and socio-economic development in a decarbonized way. That's the model of the story, right? Okay. And therefore we come to the question, what is carbon credit and offsetting, right? So it's nothing that carbon credits allows companies, if I'm emitting 100 tons, my target is 200 tons, I can buy the other 100 tons from the markets, public or private markets, right? Through tradable permits. It's just like your financial markets or your mutual funds or your whatever, right? Which enable, so basically, if I buy the tradable permit, it will enable the holder of the permit to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide. If I have 100, I can emit 100 tons of carbon, right? And so on, and other greenhouse gases, right? But at the same time, please understand that greenhouse gas emissions are at their highest levels in 2 million years and rising, right? And that's a fact of it. And it's going to obviously hurt us much, much more than this, right? So carbon offsets will occur when a polluting company, right, buys a carbon credit to make up for the greenhouse gas emissions. Let me give you an example of, let's say, Microsoft has just come out with a sustainability report of 2023. Uh, there is a Punita and team are CAs here, right? And they analyze financial reports. And whenever there's a profitability miss, there is a huge, noise in the markets. The market analyst, the financial analyst, the stock market reacts. But Microsoft sustainability targets are 30% higher. They've missed it by 30%. Obviously primarily due to AI ML data centers, right? The world is going more into AI ML and data centers, right? As we all know. And it's hugely emitting.
So thank you all so much for coming in. Thank you once again, sir.